This is your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Phil Miller will join me in just a little bit to talk some Twins. Excited to hear his perspectives on what's been going on lately with this team, even though they lost 3-1 on Tuesday. Some better things happening lately for them, and Phil and I will get into that. Some interesting stuff happening with the Vikings and Everson Griffen. I'll get to that after I talk to Phil Miller as well. But first, what did I miss? Got to spend some time talking about the Timberwolves trade on Tuesday that brought Patrick Beverley here in exchange for Juancho Hernangomez and Jarrett Culver. Interesting deal from a number of perspectives, and I want to break that down for you here. I think the Wolves got the best player, the best single player in the trade. That should happen, of course, when it's a 2-for-1. Patrick Beverley, 33 years old. He's a veteran point guard, figures to be a backup primarily, which is a little bit problematic given that he makes $14 million. He's on an expiring contract, but his skill set, let's throw the salary aside. That is what it is. That matched essentially what Culver and Hernangomez were going to make this year. His skill set matches what the Wolves need far better than maybe even Ricky Rubio did a season ago. He can shoot the ball. He's like a little over 38% career three-point shooter. He's a very good on-ball defender, or at least has been historically. ESPN does a defensive real plus-minus rating and breaks it down by position. He was number 8 among point guards last season. He was number 1 2 seasons ago when he was playing with the Clippers both those years. So taking that into consideration, two things that the Wolves absolutely need: three-point shooting and defense. Patrick Beverley brings that. He brings a certain toughness to the team that I think will serve them well also. So just from a pure how does he fit into the roster standpoint, I like the move quite a bit. Now, where it breaks down a little bit is on a couple of fronts. One, basically it's an admission that you missed on your number 6 pick in the 2019 draft, Jarrett Culver, which you traded up to get, by the way. You traded up and got Culver. You traded the number 11 pick, which the Suns turned into Cam Johnson, who's turned into a pretty nice rotation player, and also traded Dario Saric in that deal. Both of those guys helped them quite a bit in their push to make it to the NBA Finals this past season. So if we can just admit that was a bad pick. Now, maybe it was a weak draft. I don't know if you look at everybody who went after Culver and say, oh, they should have taken him. You know, there's a lot of teams that probably missed in that draft, especially after you got past the first couple picks of, Zion Williamson and Ja Morant. But, overall, basically, this is an admission that you missed on that pick, having to trade the number 6 pick from just 2 years ago, as part of not a salary dump, but for a veteran, essentially what could be a rental player. That's not a great look. But the third piece of it is the Wolves still don't have a major upgrade at power forward. Like this was, they've made 2 trades this offseason, one in which they acquired Taurean Prince for Ricky Rubio. Taurean Prince obviously can play some 4, but in this deal they traded away Juancho Hernangomez, who plays a little bit like Taurean Prince, maybe not as good defensively, but can shoot, is maybe a little bit more of a stretch forward than a traditional power forward. The Wolves still don't have a lot of defensive help or size inside, at least not that they've drafted or that they've gotten from the free agency or trade route. And maybe there's still another move yet to come. They still do have some cap space to maybe add a veteran in there, and maybe they will do that. But overall, they haven't really addressed that major need. Now, they created a need by dealing away Ricky Rubio. They filled that need, that backup point guard role with Patrick Beverley. I think this helps them overall. Looking at the trade machine on ESPN. Because the deal's not official, you can see what they think of the trade. Basically, they say it's basically a neutral deal. It doesn't really add wins, and in fact, it says it subtracts a win from the Wolves' projected total. And I did a whole thing yesterday on this podcast about over-unders. The Wolves number 34.5 this season, and how they've failed to hit that number almost every year in the last almost 2 decades. That they've really struggled to live up to expectations. So I don't know if this is a deal that puts them over the top, or you suddenly think, okay, this is their year. I think it is a move that improves them on the margins, and I felt the same way about the Taurean Prince for Ricky Rubio deal. Like, I feel better about their roster right now than I did, a month ago before they made these two moves. I still want to see maybe one more. I'd feel a lot better if there was one more veteran in there that was kind of a plug and play, 25 to 30 minute a night power forward to give them some defense, to give them a little bit of toughness there. Maybe that's yet to come. Overall, I like the Patrick Beverley trade. I think it makes sense for them. I just don't know how much it really moves the needle.
I'm Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer at the Star Tribune and the first 5-time guest in daily delivery history. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast, our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, and even all of Rand's future blog posts about how the Timberwolves should trade for players they will never get, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Phil Miller today on Daily Delivery. Phil, of course, covers the Twins, has done so for quite some time. Phil, I'm curious because, I haven't been watching the Twins as closely lately. I think a lot of other people are in the same boat. You get to August and they've traded a bunch of players. The season is essentially just an audition at this point, but, pay attention obviously enough for this job, this podcast, and just general curiosity to see them playing much better lately. That 8-3 stretch, beating a lot of good teams in the process. Right off the jump, I'm curious, what do you make of their improved play lately? Is this just I think before we started talking on the podcast here, you basically said, there's going to be stretches like this during the year. It just kind of happens. Is it more than that at all, or is it just, hey, sometimes you string a few together?
Well, I guess my answer is both. We need to remember in 2016 when they lost 105 games, I think it was, one of the worst seasons ever. They had a couple of stretches where they went 8-3 during the season, and one of them was against a first place Rangers team was mixed in there, and the Red Sox were in there. So 162 games allows for a lot of good and bad to happen. So there is reason to be hopeful in this stretch, and it is impressive that they have been doing it with teams that have a lot of reason to win. But it's also the randomness of a very, very long season. The good parts about this, of course, is the pitching. I mean, the one thing, the reason for the tough season that they've had has been their pitching, and they traded away their best pitcher, and they traded away the reliever that they were using the most, and suddenly the pitching is better, which is not exactly how you would draw it up. I think the good parts of this are Bailey Ober has established himself as a big leaguer. I mean, I don't think there's much doubt now that he belongs in the major leagues and is going to be in the rotation next year. Griffin Jacks is borderline, but you can make a case for him now. He'll certainly come to camp next year, much in the way Randy Dobnak did this year, thinking that he might be the fourth or fifth guy, or he might be in the bullpen, but he's probably on the team. I think he's been really impressive, especially in the way that he seems to learn from start to start and takes what he learns and gets better. I don't know if they always projected him to be a big leaguer. I think it's pretty clear now he'll have a career. And the bullpen, harder to say that the bullpen improvement is for real. I think it is in some cases, but they are basically just playing waiver wire bingo right now and trying cast off from other teams. And there are a reason that those guys were in the big leagues with other teams. There's also reasons why they're no longer there. It's hard to say that any of the new guys that they brought in are long-termers, but you can absolutely get a year or two of good pitching out of a bullpen arm, especially one who has a little bit of experience. So, I think the pitching is finally starting to come around. The Twins always knew that it would be a relatively good hitting lineup. 8-3, it's a lot more fun for the fans to watch. I don't know if it. I don't know that we can read a whole lot into it.
I made the realization on Tuesday's show that since the 14 and 28 start, they actually are a game over 500. So, it's hard to say what to make of it. I think I've had the same challenge in evaluating the Timberwolves. Like, what do we make of a big second half improvement when some teams are playing for different reasons than others? You got a lot of other teams are in the dog days in August and September too, so you can't get too excited about things like that. But I think the points you made about Ober and Jax are good ones, in that if you're going to learn anything this year, you want to learn about what pitching might be ready in 2022. Anybody else aside from those two guys? I'm assuming we're going to keep seeing those guys as long as they're happy with, that their innings aren't getting too high, things like that. Who else? I figure I've felt for a while since the Cruz trade that Joe Ryan could be a candidate. I don't know if that's a wait till September, if that's sooner. Who else do you want to see, and who else do you think we will see?
Well, first about Ryan, it's definitely wait till September. I mean, he hasn't pitched in a couple of weeks since the Olympics now. So, sure. And they don't even know him. He came to Target Field on Sunday and met everybody, and after the game pitched a bullpen with Wes Johnson. So they're getting a look at him. But I would expect him to get a couple of starts, at least a couple of starts in September, and get a good look before the spring training next year. One other guy that we haven't seen since probably May is Lewis Thorpe, who is coming back from an injury that has cost him 2.5 months. He's healthy again. It's important that I think for the Twins to figure out if he is going to be a big leaguer or not. He has shown signs that kind of jerked him around a little bit this year. I think he's made 3 starts, and after every one of them went back down. So I think next year he's out of options. So they're going to have to know whether or not he's worth counting on and making the team. As for the others, I'd be surprised. Maybe Drew Strotman, the other guy that they got in the Rays trade. He's pitching on a regular basis now in St. Paul. They could give him a look. But one thing we have to remember this year, unlike most years, is the minor leagues are still playing in September this year. Usually minor leagues end on Labor Day, and then it's easy for teams to call guys up and take a look. You can't do that anymore. The rosters only expand to 28 in September, and the Saints need pitching too. And if you're just looking to give these guys innings and work, there's less reason to bring up a whole bunch of guys. Well, you can't bring up a whole bunch of guys, but I'd be surprised if we see. I can't really think of any other pitcher that is likely to come up this year with the Saints season lasting into October.
From the position player standpoint, one guy that I've talked about before, even had a short interview with him on the show after he hit 3 home runs in his Saints debut, was Jose Miranda. Still a young guy, only 23, I think, has made the jump from AA to AAA, and seems like he hasn't missed a whole lot there either, still playing well for the Saints. Is that someone that we should be on the lookout for, or do they want to kind of be careful not to mess with confidence or rush somebody like that, who's, I believe, leading the minor leagues in hits this season between those 2 levels?
Yeah, he's having an incredible year. He's not on the roster, not on the 40-man roster, which is not a big hurdle, but it's a good question. How much value is there in a couple of weeks of at-bats at another level? For one thing, they have a third baseman, one who walks down the baseline these days, in Josh Donaldson, who is trying to play through clearly a hamstring that's not fully healthy. If if Josh Donaldson finally goes on the injured list, maybe that's a possibility. He is having an incredible season. One of the best by a position player I can remember since maybe Kirilov's big year 3 or 4 years ago. Would they bring him up in September? I suppose that there is some chance of getting him used to the big league travel, the big league, and seeing some pitchers who really know what they're doing. It would not surprise me, though, again, with the Saints playing every day, he's going to get at bats. It's just a matter of giving him experience. I don't know that we're necessarily going to see him in Minneapolis.
Does it change things too? I mean, obviously the shuttling back and forth is easier, but the fact that they can go get a look at these guys at AAA pretty much whenever they want probably reduces the need, I suppose, to have them up here necessarily too. If they can just, go 15 miles instead of however long it is to Rochester to get a better look at these guys on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, that's one thing that the players talk about a lot that fans don't realize is when these guys were getting shuttled up and down, that's packing up your stuff and going back to Rochester, probably living in a hotel for weeks at a time because it's hard to get an apartment that you're not going to live in. That part of it has been terrific for the AAA players. They can just live in the Twin Cities. They can come to Target Field and see their once and future teammates. So it's good for the organization too. I hadn't considered, though, you make a good point that if the Twins and their scouts can just see these guys across town on a given night, maybe there's no need to bring guys up. That's an interesting consideration that kind of works against the players. I don't think the Twins are worried much about that.
No, I don't think so. Just struck me as kind of an oddity that they not most markets don't have that opportunity now.
Yeah, it's more of them do than before, but it is a pretty nice thing for the organization. I wonder if it has worked out as well for the Saints. I've been thinking a look back on the Saints season is going to be pretty interesting at the end of the year too.
I hope they keep, by the way, not to get on a tangent, I hope they keep the 6-game series thing. That just seems like it's how it should be the whole time. Just play Tuesday through Sunday, and then Monday is your travel day. There's no need to bus all across the upper Midwest. Just, stay in one place for 6 days, play this team 6 times, and get on your way.
If the fans are good with it, you might be right about that. Cut down on the travel, and what's the harm in it? I don't know if season ticket holders mind seeing the same. Do season ticket holders come to see the opposition? I don't know.
Not in AAA unless it's a hot prospect or something like that. I don't think they really care if it's the same team a bunch of times in a row.
Right, cutting down the travel is always a great consideration. I bet the players love it because they're there for a week.
A couple more things for Phil Miller. We didn't really talk about some of the guys that are already here and trying to establish themselves, at least on the position player side. But Trevor Larnach, one of the guys that's been up for quite a while, sent down the other day. He'd been in a pretty rough patch this season. He got off to a pretty good start and looked like he's still got some long-term potential, but maybe some holes in the swing, some scouting reports, people figuring out kind of where his hot and cold zones are. Guy like Brent Rooker's getting a longer look now, especially after Nelson Cruz was traded. Obviously, Kirilloff out for the season with the wrist injury. Maybe just thoughts on those guys as they head into 2022 and what they can accomplish for the rest of 2021, especially obviously Larnach and Rooker in that case.
Yeah, I got a couple of angry emails as I do pretty regularly today about Larnach, about stupid Twins. It's a lost season. How can you not keep this guy and give him at bats? And it kind of took me by surprise. But when you think about it, maybe it makes a little more sense. is force feeding a player major league at bats, seeing major league pitching all the time. It doesn't mess with his confidence. I asked Eric Falvey if he could think of guys that were really hurt by being called up too early, by being thrown in just because of the need at the big league level. And he couldn't really remember the specific names, but of course, you don't remember the guys that were damaged by it and didn't just become established as big leaguers because they didn't become established as big leaguers. So hard to remember those guys. He does think that it is a concern. And just last night, I was watching the Giants game on TV, and Taylor Rogers' brother came in, and Taylor Rogers for a couple of years would quietly complain to us that his brother was stuck in AAA, that the Giants wouldn't bring him up, and the announcers were talking about Tyler Rogers when he was in, and talking about how he's been the best relief pitcher on the Giants staff in their bullpen this year. He's really a fully developed pitcher, and it just made you think, you really guys do improve with experience. Sometimes they're not ready. Sometimes it can be a setback. And Larnach he's such a smart guy about his hitting. When you talk to him, he knows what he's doing and he knows what his problems are. Getting the pressure of you have to produce because the eyes of Twins Nation is on you. Getting that often for a few weeks and letting him work on what he needs to work on in AAA. It strikes me as it surprised me at the time, but the more I think about it, the more I think it makes sense.
Nick Gordon replaces him essentially on the big league club. I'm having a hard time figuring out where he fits and if he's going to make it. He's obviously got some skills. He's fast. He can, he does take some productive at bats, and he's versatile, and that they've kind of played him all over the field. Is Nick Gordon, does he have super utility potential, kind of guy on the bench, or is that not gonna is that gonna be a not enough hit, I guess, in his game to make it all the way?
Well, they think that's his role going forward. One problem I have with it is guys like that, super utility guys, usually come up as great fielders and worth having in the lineup for their fielding, but you're not sure how much they're going to hit. With Nick, it's kind of the opposite. He's had trouble finding a position, and they think that he's a big league hitter eventually, but and he has a skill set that they could use that they don't have much of. Certainly, this is one of the slowest Twins teams in recent history and maybe in team history. But so you're asking a guy to learn a lot of positions all at once. This is not how utility guys are normally created, and I just wonder if it's possible to do it during the season. I think Nick has a long winter ahead of taking ground balls and fly balls everywhere and trying to learn the finer points of defense. Rocco mentioned yesterday that he could see Nick as a defensive replacement down the stretch for late inning situations. And I'm trying to think of what position you would play him where he is an upgrade. Maybe left field, because Rooker isn't the most sure glove out there. But I feel kind of bad for Nick because I think he's established he's probably worthy of a big league spot at the plate, but this indecision about what position he's going to play, they saw him for 5 years in the minors at shortstop and have obviously decided he's not a shortstop. They really do need to find a position for him, or if he's going to play many positions, he's got a lot of work to do, and they kind of sprung this on him. It's probably his chance to stick with the Twins long term, but boy, I don't know that I would consider him a plus defender at any position right now.
Which is too bad because they kind of don't have a shortstop next year.
No, they probably don't. Andrelton Simmons has turned out to be probably no longer a big league hitter, and has been good but not great in the field. I think they're pretty clearly going to move on from him. This was, the plan was that this is the bridge to Royce Lewis, and that that's a guy that we were going to see in September and make him ready for the big leagues. That's not happening now since he's been out all year with the knee surgery. So it will be an interesting offseason to see how they fix shortstop. I'm sure it's another stopgap, I would imagine, which keeps them out of the big-time free agent list. So I suspect they'll trade for a veteran who can handle the position for a while. I don't think they want to move Jorge Polanco back there. So that is going to be, outside of the pitching, that's probably the biggest question mark of the offseason.
Indeed, it is. I won't ask you to peer into your crystal ball yet, and I'm still trying to get a handle on: is there a quick pivot in 2022 back into contention, or do we really think that that's too many if moments to get there? Maybe we can tackle that in a September edition of this instead of mid-August. But Phil, always appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping on today, and we'll see what the rest of the year brings. Maybe they'll gain a little bit of momentum and positivity heading into 2022.
Yeah, I'm surprised at how upbeat everyone is now for a team this far out of the race. So if they keep that up, it's not a lost last 6 weeks.
Good stuff from Phil, as always, and we recorded that Tuesday afternoon, knowing that there was going to be a game between then and when we recorded. Twins lost 3-1, but most of the other stuff we talked about holds up pretty well, especially Bailey Ober, another good start for the Twins, like Phil said, kind of establishing himself as a potential rotation piece next season. Been impressed with him, and that's just good news for the Twins that some of their young pitching is showing that they can do some good things this year already. Let's finish this with the cooler. Everson Griffen, former Vikings standout, drafted in 2010, was here for 10 seasons. He played last season with Dallas and then was traded to Detroit. He's going to be in for a workout. Our Ben Gessling reports we're in for a workout today. And, it's interesting on two fronts. One, Vikings, Mike Zimmer kind of loading up on familiar players. He always wants those familiar veterans. Brings back Mackenzie Alexander this season. Brings in some other veteran guys that he, Sheldon Richardson, guys that he knows what they can do. So I'll be interested to see how that workout goes and whether Everson Griffen finds a role maybe as a situational pass rusher on this team, again, opposite Daniil Hunter. There's still a battle going on, and for that other defensive end spot, he could become part of the rotation if he still has something left in the tank. Now, the other piece of this is more interesting, though. It's the drama part of it. And Griffen, if you'll remember, this was even this calendar year, January of 21, unleashed a series of tweets, one of which was very disparaging towards Kirk Cousins, basically an honest assessment of him. I'm not going to read it verbatim because it contains a word that probably isn't mentionable on this podcast, but he also basically laid bare the organization's dirty laundry, saying, ask Zimmer if he wanted Kirk. He will tell you the truth. Who wanted Kirk Cousins? Take your guess. That was just 8 months ago. Like, how do the Vikings work past that if they are going to sign him? And it's even surprising to bring in Griffen for a workout, given that history and given that recent history, and given that Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins are still here. I would be very interested to see how that is being played out in the locker room, especially if Everson Griffen ends up signing here. Could be another signal of the divide, I guess, between Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins, that Mike Zimmer might not care what Everson Griffen had to say in that moment and just wants this player in, regardless of how that player might feel about his starting quarterback. That'll do it for today. Should be a good one tomorrow. Spencer Hall on the show. Next week, Drew McGarry from Defector Media, who writes his Vikings season preview, formerly of Deadspin. Drew's been on the show before. Great guy. Funny guy, knows his stuff, Vikings fan. He will be on next week to talk about the Vikings and to preview the season the only way he can. Thanks for joining me today. We'll catch you again on Thursday.